When the mind erases the traces of the past, the body remains an archive of feelings. Scars are not just wounds and dried flower petals that once blossomed in a storm of pain. You can forget the name, forget the voice, even forget who you loved, but the shoulders still bear the weight of touches, and the heart is the rhythm of old fear, hands trembling in silence. They don't ask why. They remember holding on to something, which has already sunk into oblivion. But when the sun touches your skin, the trembling subsides, as if warmly saying, "You're here, you're alive, it's all over." Knees that once fell in despair, today they stand, and they don't know why the tears flowed, but they feel that it was once important. This is the strength of the body. Truths live in it, which reason no longer dares to utter. And in this silence, between inhalation and exhalation, between the beating of the heart and the sound of the wind, the body whispers. The mind forgets, but the body remembers the truth. Sometimes, a person wakes up in the morning and can't remember what exactly is bothering him. Sleep slips away, leaving behind only a vague feeling of heaviness, as if there is something unspoken inside. He gets up, stretches, and in this movement his shoulder responds with a strange pain. A doctor would say, an old injury, but the person himself does not remember where it came from. He does not remember the fall, does not remember the blow, but the body remembers. During the day, he walks down the street and suddenly stops at an alley. His gaze slides along the walls, the shadows. He doesn't know why, but inside he feels cold. The rational mind shrugs, just an accident, just a coincidence. But the heart clenches and the fingers tremble for a second. He walks on, saying nothing, because the mind has forgotten. But the body hasn't. That night, as he falls asleep, he touches an old scar on his side. The summer light hits it at a particular angle, and it seems not a scar, but a stalk. It has closed, yes, but something else has grown out of it. Perhaps the habit of hugging himself tighter, or the inability to raise his voice, or perhaps a strange calm at the sight of someone else's pain. Sometimes his fingers freeze in the air, as if they wanted to touch something that had long since disappeared. His hands tremble, not knowing why. And then the sun comes out, and with the first warm rays his skin remembers. Once, in the silence, someone held his palm, firmly, reliably, with love. And then the trembling goes away. Not because everything became clear, but because the body felt it can still be at peace. We like to think that the mind is everything, that if we forget, it never happened. But the body lives outside of memory. It puts pain into bones, joy into a walk, fear into a posture. It protects us when we try to hide from ourselves. And if one day you feel something stirring inside you without a reason, don't rush to reject it. It's not weakness. It's an echo of a truth you can't remember, but which is still alive in you, because the mind forgets. But the body remembers the truth. He began to notice it more and more often. The lungs were compressed in the crowded transport. Although no one shouted or pushed, somewhere in the body an old voice awoke, whispering, "Be careful. You once couldn't breathe here." And he looked out the window, confused. Where is the anxiety if nothing happened? In the evening, when it was raining, he went out onto the balcony and stood under the streams of water. And suddenly, I felt not only drops running across my skin and memories, not in the head, but in the flesh itself. As he was once held in the rain, how tears got tangled with the sky, how he trembled and someone's hands warmed him, and then they disappeared. He didn't know whose, and he never knew whose love his body so craved. But every time he found himself alone in the rain, it remembered, and that was almost a consolation. There were days when he caught himself, who eats slowly with some strange gratitude, as if there was a famine in the past, not necessarily physical, but so sharp that now every touch of bread, it was a holiday. The mind said, "You have never been hungry," but the body stored memory differently. Not with facts, but with gestures, instincts, tenderness for things that were once unavailable. And there was one more detail, smells. Oh, how they tore him out of time. He could walk down the street, and suddenly, the aroma of orange peel, or tobacco, or soap, and something flared up in my chest, which defied explanation. He froze. He felt an image rising from under his skin, but couldn't reach it. The mind was silent, and the body trembled as if saying, "You were happy, here, with someone, once." And in this eternal struggle between mind and flesh, he began to choose silence, not a denial, not an analysis, and attention. He began to touch his scars, as a gardener touches the bark of an old tree, not to forget, but to thank. He no longer looked for meaning in every memory, because I realized the meaning is already built into the gate, in the way he hugs, in how long he holds his hand. Once upon a time, he tried to understand everything. Now he just listened. Myself, your body, that deep part, which does not speak in words, but he speaks the truth. And this is true, even if forgotten, lived in it, and blossomed, like scars, that turn into flowers. One day he noticed that he began to look at others differently, not through the prism of words, not through masks, but through the way they move. As one man draws his shoulders in too sharply, as if he was always waiting for a blow, how another smiles too quickly, as if he is afraid of not being liked. He began to see in people that they themselves no longer remember, stories written in the curves of the body, in the way they sit, how they freeze when touched, how tense their fingers are when they are silent. He realized we are all living chronicles. Every step is an echo of the old road. Every movement is an echo of an event, which may never have been named. He became softer, not because I began to understand more, and because I understood the main thing. Not everything needs an explanation. Some truths live only in silence. Sometimes he would sit by the window and just breathed, with eyes closed, feeling the air pass through him, how the chest rises and falls. That's the whole truth. This is life. He felt his body gradually letting go. The pain that had been in my shoulder blades for a long time. It became easier, not because he forgot her, but because he recognized her. Because he once said, without words, "You were there, I see you, and that's okay." The past is not gone. It simply stopped asking to scream. It became the ground from which one could grow. And scars are not a reminder of pain, and proof of survival, and even more, transformations. He realized that joy is also alive in the body, in the ease with which the shoulders finally drop, in warm tiredness after a long walk, in the way a feeling of light suddenly arises in the chest, without reason, simply because the body knows everything is fine now. And this became his prayer, not with words, not by appealing to the gods, and with attention, silence, deep respect for your body, which has lived through everything that he once tried to forget, because the mind forgets, and the body always remembers the truth. Sometimes in the mornings he felt a strange lightness. No reason, no backstory, just ease. It was as if something heavy had come out from inside. What did he wear for so long? Not knowing how to let go. He didn't know what exactly was gone. Maybe an old fear of abandonment. Perhaps the guilt for which he once apologized, but never forgave myself. Maybe it was a cry he had held back since childhood, when I learned to remain silent in order to survive. But the body knew. It pushed it out itself, slowly, softly, as spring pushes winter out of the earth. He no longer waited for the moment when he would become like before, because I realized there is no going back, but there is forward movement. And this forward is not a new beginning and the continuation of the path, where even pain had meaning. He learned to stroke his chest, like a mother stroking her child, not to relieve anxiety, and to say, "You are, that's enough." He looked at his hands, strong, tired, somewhere trembling, somewhere solid. They were always with him. They held onto the steering wheel as they drove into the night. They wiped away other people's tears. They were clenched into fists, and then unclenched, when he chose not to respond to pain with pain. And now he knew, even if everything disappears, names, addresses, faces, the body will remain. It will go. We'll hug. We'll tremble and calm down. And in every gesture there is truth. One day he saw a child who fell down and cried. Nobody came. But he came. He sat down next to me. Didn't say, "Don't cry." He just put his hand on my shoulder, silently. And at that moment he realized Everything he went through, everything that his body retained, everything he went through, it was necessary so that at this very moment, just be there. Just be, because there is truth, which cannot be said. It can only be felt. And the body, it always knew, even before the words, you are alive, you loved, you were injured, and you continue. Reason will forget. The body preserves. And in this eternal calm, yes, now he increasingly found himself paying more attention to details, not to facts, not to events, but to sensations, to the way his skin reacted to a voice, to the way his stomach tightened when a certain person entered the room, to the way warmth spread inside him when someone smiled sincerely. These were not thoughts. These were answers living in the body, honest, unfiltered, unanalyzed, just the truth requiring no confirmation. He began to trust these sensations. After all, the mind could deceive. It had learned to do so long ago. Rationalize pain, justify betrayal, call fear caution. But the body never lied. It contracted when it became unsafe. It tired before he allowed himself to admit exhaustion. It cried through insomnia, through migraines, through a lump in the throat. And it also healed, slowly, stubbornly, like grass breaking through asphalt. He increasingly felt how his body itself was telling him the way. If it felt bad, it asked for peace. If it felt anxious, it was drawn to the air, to the trees, to the river. If it hurt, it wanted silence and soft light. He began to respect these requests as one respects the requests of an old friend whom one trusts more than anyone else. One night he woke up from a strong heartbeat. Before, he would have been scared, would have run away into his thoughts, would have started looking for the reason. But now he just sat up, closed his eyes, put his hand on his chest and said to himself, I hear you. Everything is fine. I am near. His heart did not calm down right away, but something deep inside became quieter. It was like a confession, like coming home. He began to understand that the body is not an enemy. It is not a weakness. It is not a burden. It is a temple, not in a sublime sense, not as an ideal, but as a place where everything lives: pain, joy, memory, and oblivion. A place where he is real, where he has always been, even when he was losing himself. Sometimes he felt the past in his walk, in the slight limp that no one noticed, or in the tilt of his head when a certain name was spoken, or in the way he froze when someone came too close. But he didn't blame himself for it now. He didn't think of himself as broken. He knew these were the marks of a journey. They were a map of a life drawn not in ink but in touches, in lost hugs, in blows, and in the rare moments when someone held him without asking why. He learned to be gentle with himself, not to pity himself, not to save himself, but to be there. Like with that child whom no one hugged then, like with himself, forgotten in the past. He no longer waited for someone to come and say that he was okay. He himself became that voice, that hand, that warmth. And at some point he realized that everything he was looking for outside was already inside him. Peace, love, acceptance. This is not a reward that needs to be earned, but a state that can be remembered. Not with the mind, but with the body. Because the body remembers how to be alive, even if you yourself have forgotten about it. He walked through life no longer as someone who had lost something, but as someone who had found it. Not an answer, not a formula, not a meaning, but himself, real, fragile, warm, imperfect, whole. And in every fold of skin, in every breath, in every slow step, lived one simple truth that did not need to be proven. It simply was. The mind forgets, but the body always remembers the truth. Now every day for him became not a search, but a return. Returning to feelings, to oneself, to that quiet inner truth, which does not require words and does not crave attention. He no longer asked, "Why do I feel this?" He just allowed himself to feel. When sadness came, he no longer drove her away. He sat down next to her, like with a tired friend, and gave her a place, in breathing, in the body, in silence. And the sorrow accepted did not develop into pain. She was passing by, like rain washing away the dust from the windows. He stopped calling his reactions incomprehensible. If there was resistance inside, he knew somewhere the border was. If trembling came, this means that somewhere there is a fear that has not yet been expressed. If your heart beat faster next to someone, so history lives there, not yet told. He walked the streets without turning away from vulnerability. Now he saw everyone had their own scars. For some people, they are visible on the skin. For some, it's hidden in their movements. For some, it's in their voice, in the pauses, in an attempt to joke so as not to cry. He began to notice how easy it was to lose yourself in this world, because we are taught to trust only what can be explained. But the body doesn't explain. It breathes, it beats, it remembers. He no longer wanted to be strong in the old sense. Strength now meant being honest, saying, "I don't know" when you don't know. Cry when tears come. Stop when you are tired, and don't demand that you be different. Sometimes he stood barefoot on the grass, just stood there, and he let the earth hold him. No stress, no rush, as if he was saying to the body, "You're home, I'm here, everything's fine." He knew that his mind would forget more than once, will distract again, rationalize, to be carried away into the future, losing touch with the present. But now it didn't frighten him anymore, because he knew, even if the mind forgets, the body will wait, silently, patiently, like an old friend, which you didn't notice, but who was walking alongside all this time. And there was great consolation in this, peace that is not built on control, but on trust. He didn't know where this path would lead, but I felt that he was real. It is not invented, it is not constructed, it's lived, and every step along the way became more than just a movement and recognition. I'm alive, I feel, and I remember. The mind will forget, words will disappear, but the body will always tell the truth. He woke up not from sounds, but from the feeling of silence inside. There was no longer war in the body, only echoes of old battles that had become sand. He drank water and felt how every drop brought back to him the life he had once lost. The scars on her skin no longer seemed ugly. They bloomed like flowers of memory. He walked, and his legs carried him not away from the pain, but through it to freedom. His breath became a prayer addressed to no one but heard by all. He touched the wall and felt his body remembering the touch that had been missing for too long. When the wind touched his cheek, he felt that it was not just air, but someone who had once left. He no longer looked for logic in his feelings. He let them come and go like the tides. Laughter began to emerge not from an attempt to hide the pain, but as its completion. He understood that love is not always a story, but always a movement towards oneself, towards others, towards the light. He was not afraid to cry among people, because he knew that each of them also carries water within themselves. Meeting the eyes of passers-by, he recognized in them the same memory hidden under the skin. He hugged slowly so that the body had time to say what the words had forgotten. Every breath became a recognition that he was here. He was breathing, he remembered. He no longer asked for oblivion, he asked for presence. And I received it. In the touch of palms, in fragility and silence. He knew, the mind is temporary, but the body is real. And in him lived a truth as old as life itself. You survived, you feel, you are alive. The mind forgets, but the body remembers the truth. He sat on the steps and listened to his heartbeat, not fast, not slow, but honestly. The sun's rays fell on his shoulders and his body accepted them as an apology for all the winters. He no longer looked for meaning in the voices outside. He listened to the inner whisper, calm as the breath of sleep. There was no haste in his gait, only respect for every step. He learned to be with himself, even in silence, even in pain, especially in pain. When his hands no longer shook, he realized, not because the fear had gone away, but because he had been heard. He walked past the mirror and did not look for someone else in the reflection. He saw himself. Old gestures, forgotten movements returned, not as weakness but as roots. He remembered the body as one remembers an old friend, with pain, with gratitude, with warmth. Each scar became a reminder of something he had once felt so strongly that he could not forget. He was in no hurry to heal. He simply stood next to his pain without turning away. He realized that being whole does not mean being unharmed. Being whole is when you take all your pieces and love them just the way they are. Sometimes he walked down the street and felt his heart smile just like that, for no reason. He knew, this is not happiness. This is silence that has come to replace the scream. He looked at the sky and knew it was inside him, just like everyone else he had once embraced and disappeared. He no longer sought eternity. He found the moment. And in this moment there was everything. Pain, memory, tenderness, breathing. He felt his body whispering to him not with words but with its presence. You didn't forget, you just kept it. The mind is silent, but the body still speaks the truth. He walked barefoot through the morning grass, and every drop of dew was a confession that the world was still kind. His fingers moved slowly, as if remembering what it was like to touch without fear. He stopped asking life why and began to thank it for everything that was left. His silence was no longer an emptiness. It became a place where the memory of the body lives. Sometimes he stopped in the middle of the street just to feel he exists, he is here, he is breathing, and that was enough. He didn't know what would happen tomorrow, but he knew that today his body didn't lie. It hurts. That means it is alive. It trembles. That means it feels. It stretches. That means it wants light. He no longer pushed away his tears because he knew they were water and water always found a way. He felt others, without words, without stories, just with his skin. He saw the man laughing, but his back was tense, and he understood how tired he had been for a long time. He met the gaze, which contained the same pain, and nodded slightly as if to say, I know. He no longer tried to heal himself with the hands of others. He became his own support. A garden grew inside it, not perfect, but real. Flowers grew there from ashes, from tears, from the places where he once fell. And now he walked through life with a body that was not an enemy. It was a book written not with ink, but with life. And he read this book every day, with his fingers, with his breath, with silence, slowly without turning over the pages of pain. And every page said the same thing. You survived. You got through. You remember. The mind will forget, but the body always remembers the truth. He was no longer afraid to stop. Where he used to be in a hurry, he now stood still. Listened to my heart beating not for survival, but for presence. He didn't chase lightness, he looked for depth. And the body led him to where it was once dark. Not to suffer again, but to bring light there. He learned that pain is not an enemy, but a signpost. That anxiety is a call, not a sentence. That every tremor has a name. Every tension has a story. He no longer fought what he felt. He asked, what do you want to tell me with this? And the body responded, not with speech, but with warm fatigue, a spasm, a tear, an exhalation. He lay down on the floor, arms outstretched, and felt like the earth, capable of holding up. Don't destroy, don't forget, but keep. To hold on to yourself. To hold on to those whom you once failed to hold on to. He allowed his body to cry where his mind said, be strong. He allowed his body to laugh where memory said, it hurt here. He allowed himself to be. No explanation, no excuse, no role. He began to see his body not as a carrier of himself, but as himself. The one who lived when he was betrayed. The one who trembled when he was hugged. The one who endured everything. He put his palm to his chest and remained silent. And in that silence there was more truth than in hundreds of conversations. Because the body doesn't lie. It does not build masks. It doesn't talk away fear. It just breathes. And if you let it, it will tell you everything. A love story that never ended. A story of pain that was heard. A story of memory that needs no words. And in the end, he smiled. Not because everything became good. Because everything became true. But in truth, you can always breathe. The mind forgets. But the body remembers. And this is salvation. He no longer tried to run away from his reflection. Now he saw it as a friend, sometimes wounded but always alive. Every scar on his body told him a story, not about pain, but about endurance, about how he kept going when it seemed like there was no strength left. He learned to listen to the silence between words, to hear the music in his own breathing, to feel the rhythm of his heart without rushing or trying to change it. Sometimes it seemed to him that the body knew more than the mind, and this knowledge was deeper than any thoughts and memories. He allowed himself to stop and just be, without tasks, without expectations, without haste. In these moments, his body reminded him of the ancient wisdom that life is not about control, but about acceptance. He felt the trembling go away as he stopped resisting, the tension dissolving into the soft warmth of the presence. He knew that to be real meant to accept both the darkness and the light, both the pain and the joy, in their entirety. And even when the mind forgot, the body kept the memory of love, of loss, of salvation. He smiled at himself in the mirror, and it was not just a smile, but a sign that he had returned home. Home is not a place, but a state where body and soul live in harmony. And in this agreement, there was everything: the past, the present, and the future. He breathed deeply and felt every cell fill with life and light. He understood that the truth is not in forgetting, but in remembering, with love and without fear, because the mind will forget, but the body always remembers. And this is true freedom. He was no longer afraid of silence because it had become his friend, in which the body whispered about what cannot be forgotten. He understood that every pain is a letter written not in words, but in feelings, which must be read in order to become whole again. He felt memory flowing through his veins, not of the past, but of survival, joy, hope that even after the darkest hour there comes light. He no longer sought explanations in the minds of others, because the body knows the truth without intermediaries. He learned to be gentle with himself, allowing the tears to flow, without hiding them behind a mask of strength, without justifying themselves before the world. Every breath became a prayer. Every movement is an acknowledgement that he is alive, what he feels, what he loves. And even if the mind forgets the ways and names, the body will remember. Remember what it's like to be human. And in this endless circle of memory and oblivion, he found peace. Because I knew, the body will never betray. It holds the truth, which the mind forgets. He felt every cell fill with light, as a quiet strength awakens within. Not pride, not victory, but simply accepting yourself as you are. He didn't want to fight the memories anymore, didn't want to run away from the shadow of the past. Now he saw a part of himself in them, complex, fragile, but alive. He learned to listen to his body, read the signals in it, and understand them without fear. When a tremor appeared, he did not brush it off, but listened, for it was a truth which reason could not express in words. He allowed himself to feel, without hiding behind masks and excuses. And in this acceptance, he found freedom. Freedom to be imperfect, freedom to cry and laugh, freedom to go your own way, which is not always even, but always honest. He knew there would be more difficulties ahead. There will be moments when the mind will try to forget again, when the pain wants to overshadow the light. But now he was ready, because the body always remembers, and in his memory the truth lives, which will never die. And in every day, in every breath, in every movement, he found this truth, simple but deep as the ocean. The mind can forget, but the body always keeps the truth, eternal and bright, like a flower growing from a scar.